Always live is my lesson from yesterday.
Yep.
That was a little humor.
All right. All right, we are now live. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the February edition of the City Update for the City of San Ramon. Today we have some very special guests, and our discussion will be centered around housing. We hope that the broadcast today will provide answers as to the where, when, and why of future development in the city. And I'd like to introduce our speakers today. First, we have Councilmember Zafar, who will be giving a brief welcome and introduction. And then we also have Senator Steve Glazer. We have Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Kahan. And then we also have from staff, we have Debbie Chamberlain, our Community Development Director, and Cindy Yee, our Senior Planner, who will be doing a presentation, giving you some more of the details of how development works and, again, the when, where, and why of development in the city. And we also have joining us Simone Finney, our Communications and Engagement Analyst. And I'd like to remind everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, please email us at info@sanramon.ca.gov, and we'll get that question in towards the end of the broadcast. We are streaming live on YouTube. And if you would like to view the broadcast later on, or if you know of anyone who could benefit from viewing the broadcast, please feel free to share the link. We'll also separate out the presentation as a separate video if people would like to view that later on as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Zafar.
Thank you, Stephen, and good morning, everybody, and happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our city updates, and welcome to our special guests, Assemblymember RBK and State Senator Steve Glazer. Appreciate you joining and participating in today's session. So today we're going to be focusing, like Stephen mentioned, on housing in San Ramon. Specifically, some of the rules that are now guiding how much housing we must plan for in the city. Over the years, the council has implemented several strategies to prepare for a growth in a very thoughtful manner, trying to manage the impacts as best as we possibly can. And one of the goals that the city has adopted is to prioritize growth in what we call the core of the city in order to preserve our open spaces and the character of our existing neighborhoods. Housing in the core will also allow people to walk and to work and shop in our shopping locations. And the city is also in the process of developing a walking district, which will connect the city's core and promote more walkability within the city's core. Last of all, I also want to thank the county for the vaccine rollout that's been happening. 1/5 of Contra Costa County members are now vaccinated, which is pretty amazing. So again, thank you so much for joining.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Zafar. Senator Glazer, if you can please provide us with an update, what's going on in Sacramento? I know some legislation was delayed last year due to COVID, and now there's many bills being considered. If you can give us a few highlights, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me a part of this conversation. I would note at the start that I know that this broadcast is reaching people in very difficult times, maybe the most difficult that we've ever experienced in our lives. And I know that for so many people personally, as well as their businesses, are under great stress. And I just want to extend my concerns, joining with everybody about all that we're going through, the pandemic, getting a vaccine, getting our kids back in the classroom, the serious impact on businesses throughout our community. It's a tough time. And we're working very hard to try to get through it. I think there is some real positive indicators as we go forward in the next few weeks that things are going to get better. But I just want to note that it doesn't mean we should be letting down our guard. So please be careful and be safe in all that you're doing. I want to extend my greetings to your new mayor, Hudson, on his election as mayor. I want to extend my greetings also to new council members in San Ramon, Veros and Armstrong. I look forward to working with both of you, and hopefully when things get back to some kind of normal, we can go and have a cup of coffee. I want to also add my warm wishes to Vice Mayor Perkins and Councilmember Zafar for your continued leadership in San Ramon. At difficult times like this is where we need experienced, thoughtful leaders. San Ramon has always had them on their council as their mayor, and I appreciate the partnership that we have had and we will continue to have in the months going forward. Well, today is a noteworthy day in the legislature because it's the final day to introduce legislation for the year. So it's quite a busy time for me and my staff, and for many community partners who have been working with me on various bills that we want to advance during the legislative process. It's clear to me that at 10,000-foot level, the legislature is going to continue to focus on a couple of things principally. Certainly the fallout from COVID-19. We're working so hard to figure out a solution to getting our kids back in the classroom. We're going to continue to make it a priority to focus on wildfires, both prevention and recovery, and the issue of housing, which I know is a subject matter for this conversation today. Housing affordability and the homeless remains an acute issue in our state and in our region. And all of this is happening against a backdrop of the cities under significant economic pressures from businesses closing, the lack of tax money coming in, and yet you're required to provide the same high level of services that certainly San Ramon is known for. So we are hoping that our partners in the federal government, the new administration, is going to find some relief for not just for business and for individuals, but for local governments like San Ramon, which I know have been challenged during these times. So those are the broader, I think, legislative priorities that we'll be dealing with. And there will be a whole host of bills that will be introduced in each of those spaces that we'll have debate about, and we'll try to make some good choices about, and look forward to the input of San Ramon and your constituents in trying to make the best choices that we can. For me, I have a legislative package a little bit more narrowly focused. Let me mention the highlights of those. And as I mentioned at the start, we're finalizing that package over the next few hours. But I'm going to focus this year in a couple areas. Number one, mental health. Mental health, even in normal times, is an important issue. It's not just physical health, but mental health. And the stigma of mental health, I'm happy to say, is slowly going away. We know that how we're feeling is not necessarily just a physical thing. And so for all of us, including our kids, there's a lot of challenges in the mental health space that we can do better. And so I have a package of bills that's going to focus on that issue. I'm also going to continue the work that I have done dealing with wildfire mitigation programs and what we can do to keep our communities safe, not just for people, but also for animals. And you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. I'm going to focus a bill on infectious disease data. You know, one of the things we've learned during this pandemic is that we want to rely on science and we want to rely on good data in the choices that we are making in this pandemic. But we really had a void of transparency on data on the virus spread. So I'm going to advance a bill to stimulate an important conversation about how we can, in the future, rely upon and have full transparency on the data in this area of infectious disease. You may know that last year I advanced a bill on short-term rentals. We had a tragedy in Orinda almost a year ago, more than a year ago, last Halloween, 5 people killed in a short-term party rental house. You know, unfortunately, in many of our communities, people are renting these homes not just for a break, a vacation, but as a party house. Cities need to have the tools to crack down on these violators. And so I have legislation that will increase the fines and give San Ramon and other communities the tools to make sure that short-term rentals are being done in a responsible way. That's a short version of many other things that I would love to talk about, but I'm sensitive to everyone's time. I am going to continue to do work on broadband access for all. I know that Assemblywoman Rebecca Bauer-Kahan is going to talk in a moment, and she has a very good bill on burn notification that pleased to be able to co-sponsor. I'm also going to work in this area of telecom resiliency and advance efforts to improve our transportation system, certainly Valley Link in your neck of the woods. So I've been honored to be given a new chairmanship in this session. I'm chair of the Elections and Constitutional Amendments Committee. It's going to allow me to focus a lot of attention on this issue of the integrity of our elections, making sure that confidence is high and that the work of our elections officials are done appropriately and correctly, and improves access for all of us to our election process. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to give me a short review of what I am working on, and I look forward to partnering with San Ramon and all other folks in the community to advance our shared objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Glazer. Yes, and thank you for mentioning the mental health legislation that you're working on. It's a big focus in Contra Costa County right now. There is an extensive study going on. It's countywide about providing emergency services for mental health issues. And our city manager is heavily involved with it. It's one of his passions. So we appreciate the support from Sacramento as well. So thank you very much. I'd like to turn it over to Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan right now. And lovely picture in the background. I hope it's San Ramon. If not, I have a few. It is San Ramon? I don't know. The tree? Possibly?
I think so. I know it's up. I mean, I don't, it might be the border with Danville, but it's right there.
Well, we'll call it San Ramon. If not, I have a few more that I can
promise
send you.
It's the San Ramon Valley. I just can't.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just call it San Ramon Valley, and it is San Ramon Valley. So anyway, not to get too competitive here, but so I'll turn the floor over to you, and if you can tell us what's going on in your realm of the world, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen. And I want to start by thanking you all for continuing to host this, and Mayor Hudson for continuing this tradition. And it's different than when we used to meet in the diner, but this way everyone can join us from home, which is really nice. And I know it's obviously important that we continue these traditions, but also do them in a way that keeps our community safe. So thank you, Councilmember Zafar, for hosting us. Thank you to all the staff that works day in and day out to make sure the city continues to run as smoothly as it does. And you have done incredible work from the beginning of this pandemic. I remember talking to you about your farmers market and ensuring people could do pickup at the farmers market instead of have to come in. So during the true lockdown in the spring, and through vaccination and your partnership on that, you have been an incredible partner in keeping our community safe. So thank you, because this has been an incredibly trying time. And I know the senator spoke about that. And now we can't let up our guard. We know our numbers are going down. We need to continue to do what we're doing to cause that. But there's also a light at the end of the tunnel. I know that in your community and in my community, my kids are in school right now. They're in a classroom as we speak, as of this week, which I know is also happening in the San Ramon Valley. So, we're getting there. And obviously vaccination is an important piece of that. I had the privilege on Wednesday of spending the day with San Ramon Valley Fire in City Center, helping screen folks who were coming in for their vaccines. And that is an incredible effort of our local fire department to ensure we're getting as many vaccines into the arms of our seniors as we can. And people are so grateful for that service. So, there's great work happening in San Ramon. So thank you all for that. So to speak, as the senator mentioned, today is legislative deadline day. And it's been incredible partnership over the last 2 years. And he and I were actually on the phone or on Zoom late into the night with our community partners talking about last minute strategy on bills for our local communities. So we're working hard to ensure that we are working alongside all of our partners to do what needs to be done for this community, especially during this trying time. I want to start a little bit on the budget. I know it's an important part of what the state does and how we support our local communities. And last spring was obviously a difficult time for us in the Capitol. We got projections that our deficit would be $54 billion. Cutting $54 billion from a budget is not easy, especially when it's three separate parties that have to come to an agreement about what that should look like. But we worked really hard to pass a budget in the spring that we could be as proud of as possible. Again, we knew people were going to be suffering as a result of that, but ensuring that the cuts were not to our most vulnerable was really the legislature's priority. Ensuring our schools didn't take the brunt of that hit, that our seniors, those who we knew were going to be food insecure, had the resources they need, and protecting our seniors. And we did that. And I think we were really proud of that. And obviously, the economy has not reacted the way I think many of our experts anticipated, and now our deficit is $5 billion, still a very large deficit, but nothing compared to what we anticipated in the spring. And that's allowing us to do more than we had expected, which is good news, but still we continue to have to be responsible in our spending. But this week, the legislature and the governor announced an exciting new relief package that I think is really important for California. It's a $2 billion stimulus deal that will help our small businesses and our most vulnerable. It includes tax credits for our small business, deferral of fees for, our hairdressers and others who pay fees to the state to ensure they can continue to do business. We're able to do small business grants right here in California, up to $25,000 for small businesses. And we had originally said we would do 500 million of that. We're increasing that to $2 billion. We know how hard our small businesses are suffering, and we want to do everything we can to provide relief for them at this time, get them through the pandemic. So on the recovery, those jobs are secure. Our small businesses are some of our best and most vibrant employers, and they also are the heart of our community. So we want to do our part to get them through this. We also are providing stipends for childcare. As a mother, I know how difficult this has been on families, both families that traditionally need childcare and those who have school-age kids who aren't in school. And for our working families, that's really hard. And we need to continue to support childcare, especially as we discuss gender equity coming out of this pandemic. For those of you following the numbers, most, if not all, of the jobs lost in December were women, and predominantly women of color. So we have to focus on how we continue our strides in gender equity despite the losses that we have made through this pandemic. Also, there's $1.5 billion focused on creating jobs. We know, and my office spends almost every day working day in and day out, and I know the senators as well, helping people who need unemployment checks because of the job losses that have resulted from our business closures. And so how are we going to recreate those jobs? And so, $1.5 billion focused on creating infrastructure projects and jobs, shovel-ready projects, which back to the senator's point about Valley Link, ensuring that we are moving forward on our local projects so that we can bring in some of those jobs and those dollars to our local community is really key in some of the work that we're doing in the Capitol. One of the things I've been really focused on is schools. The senator mentioned mental health impacts of this pandemic, and it is real, and it is real amongst our youth. And so we have to work hard to ensure that we have ways to get them healthy, both physically, but also mentally. And that means getting them the social interaction that they need, that we all need, but really our young kids. And so it was critical that we continue reopening. I'm so grateful that we're seeing that in our local school districts. I know not everyone's opting to go back, and that's okay. There should be options. But for those families for whom it's right, that we get those kids back into the classroom, even part-time. My kids are on hybrid, so it's only the mornings, but I can't tell you how excited they are about recess. It's the little things. So again, continuing to work on school reopening, we announced a legislative deal yesterday. The Senate and the Assembly came together on what will be a total of about $12 billion in funding focused on both reopening and learning loss. $6 billion of that is federal aid. $2 billion of that will be on reopening from the state, from our Prop 98 fund, and then another $4.6 billion focused on learning loss. We know our kids have suffered over the last year not being in the classroom. We're going to need to do more to support them, to get them back to where they should be, and this cannot have taken the academic toll that we know it has. So that's an exciting introduction yesterday. We're still working on making sure we get a deal on that, but we are focused on it. It would also require in-person learning for all students, whether it be cohorting for our older kids or getting kids back in the classroom at hybrid. So really continuing to push to get our kids back in the classroom because we think it is critical. So a little bit on the legislation that we are moving to try to move California forward at this time. Some of it's focused on small business relief, what really has hit us in the pandemic, and some of it's focused on the issues that aren't going to take a break because we're in a pandemic. So wildfires is a huge focus for my office. The senator mentioned our partnership on a bill coming out of the San Ramon Valley. Actually, it is a ordinance that you passed for Chief Meyer. So congratulations to San Ramon. And I think it's an example of our local cities doing what needs to be done, us seeing it at the state level and saying, why isn't everyone doing this? And so we are bringing legislation that would expand out your local ordinance that provides a 48-hour notice if the utility is coming in to do work that could cause a fire, giving our firefighters that advance notice of what's happening so they can pre-position and be prepared. And so actually Chief Meyer and Chief Winokur Verinda, because Verinda Moraga then followed San Ramon's lead, are our co-sponsors on that bill, and that's in partnership with Senator Glazer. So thank you for that. I really wanted to highlight the work you have done that we are just piggybacking on to make the state safer. I've also reintroduced my legislation that would provide further oversight for our utilities. We know utilities caused wildfires is a real problem. We suffered a lot from the PSPS. And so we need our utilities to be stepping up, hardening the grid, doing the mitigation work they need to do. And we know that's not happening as much as we would like. And so this bill would say that the regulations on the books, which are pretty vast and expansive, they're just not being enforced by the PUC, would be able to be enforced by the local district attorneys as well. So we have a local person we could go to if we knew the utilities aren't doing what they need to do to prepare for wildfires. So I'm excited by that bill, and I'm hopeful that this year it'll get a hearing. Last year, everything was cut short as a result of the pandemic. I'm also continuing to focus on climate change. It's not taking a break, and we saw that with the wildfires in the fall, and right now we're seeing it with winter storms across the Midwest and the South. And so we're doing a bill on air quality, something that actually is very focused on the Tri-Valley, because the trucks that leave our port and go to the 5 come right through the Tri-Valley and result in air quality emissions that are less than one would like. We also know that in Livermore and elsewhere, Amazon is moving in with distribution centers that's going to impact the air quality. So this would give our local air board the ability to study those emissions and work with our private partners to change behavior of those trucks so that our emissions are better, whether it be going to clean vehicles, which is obviously the hope, but also we've seen incredible impacts of just rerouting and timing and things like that. So that's the goal of that bill. I'm also working on clean air. So despite the rolling blackouts happening in August, we actually had enough power in our battery backups that are throughout our grid to power everybody, and we can't use it. The CPUC has not created a way for us to take that battery backup and use it in the grid. And so this bill would force the PUC to do that because it's clean energy and it's available. And so we should be using it. We should be using all of our resources to keep our lights on and doing it in a clean way. Also focused, we've touched now several times on mental health, and I think it's critical because it really is a crisis. It was before and it is now. And so in partnership with Contra Costa, San Ramon, and other cities, I introduced a bill actually just yesterday, AB 988, which I'm partnering with the senator on, which would set up the phone line, which would do exactly what Stephen mentioned, which is if you're in mental health crisis, instead of 911, you would call 988 and you would get that mental health crisis response that you deserve. So rather than law enforcement showing up, you would get a response team with mental health professionals. So we're taking mental health out of the criminal justice system and giving the healthcare response to the individuals that need it easily and with direct access. And I think it's a really exciting partnership with Contra Costa, and I think it'll be a game changer, hopefully, in how people access mental health response. And, that came out of discussions. The county was working on it, has been working on this effort with our cities for years. We had a gentleman in Walnut Creek who was in mental health crisis who was killed and probably would have benefited from a mental health response that was stronger. And this hopefully would give an avenue for that and save additional lives. Continuing to work on gender equity, it's an issue I'm passionate about and I touched on, but that's a little bit of what, I don't want to go on too much, but a little bit of what we're working on. I know you wanted me to touch on housing, so before I hand it back, I will do so. One of the things I really wanted to touch on is the eviction relief we just did as a legislature. I think it's a really critical piece of legislation that focuses on the people most in crisis right now. We do not want people to fall into homelessness because they have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. Once somebody falls into homelessness, it takes years to get them out. So the best thing we can do is avoid that. And so we did pass eviction relief. Luckily, with federal aid, we're able to support both our tenants and our landlords. So now there is financial relief for our landlords, who we know the vast majority are small landlords who need that money to keep the mortgage, which then keeps the individual house. So we were able to pass relief for both our tenants and our landlords to get them through, hopefully, the pandemic into a place where they can get back on their feet and not lose their home. So that was a really important piece of legislation we passed just in the past few weeks. I also want to highlight Project Roomkey, because the data, and I don't know if the city staff has seen the data coming out of Contra Costa on Project Roomkey, which was $1.7 billion we spent buying hotels and hotel rooms to house homeless. over 50% of the people that have gone into Project Roomkey in Contra Costa have successfully exited the program into permanent or other housing. That is incredible. That is the best numbers I've seen out of a homelessness program in my career. And I worked in homelessness for many years. So that's the kind of program I think we need to be focused on, looking at our success rates and continuing to work on it. So there's some exciting things happening in homelessness that I hope we will continue to focus on, looking at why we were successful, how we can replicate that, and do more, because our homelessness crisis has to be addressed. So thank you all for having me. And I know, I think I'm turning it back over to Stephen to give it to the city staff.
Thank you very much. It's always impressive with both you and the senator, the range of issues that you work on and the level of detail and the knowledge you have to have about each one of those issues. Just hearing you both in 10 or 15 minutes, it's very impressive. Just I don't think that most people realize how much you know, the diversity of issues that you work on at the state level occur. They think it's just, you know, certain laws about housing or transportation, but just all the mental health and the business assistance. And we've received feedback from a lot of our businesses, very grateful for what the state is doing and really providing a lifeline for the businesses. And I do have to do just a very quick shameless plug here for a program that we have at the city. If you do own a business in San Ramon and you want expert help on applying for state and federal assistance, you can sign up for our business assistance program at sanramon.ca.gov/BAP. It's completely free, and we will connect you with experts who will help you step by step through the application process for any state or federal grant opportunity. And they can also connect you with opportunities that you may not be aware of. So just a very quick plug for that program. It's been highly successful. We have over 80 businesses signed up, and they've received collectively about $4 million now with this.
Incredible. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so just sorry, had to do the plug whenever I can. We're trying to get the word out to make sure everybody's signed up. So with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie and Cindy to give an overview and a presentation on housing rules and regulations in San Ramon.
Thank you, Stephen. I'll give Cindy a minute to upload our PowerPoint presentation. Great, 1 second here.
Okay, is that screen showing up for you, Debbie?
It is. Thank you so much, Cindy. If you want to move on to our next slide for me, I'd appreciate it. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're going to talk about housing in San Ramon, a little bit about the process, some of the recent, and we'll talk about the process, the state influence on state legislation influence on housing, SB 330, and how San Ramon really plans for housing, and specifically our upcoming regional housing needs allocation process, which Cindy will be providing that overview for you all. So I just want to kind of start out with that housing has become a very prominent issue for every city and county in California. And through the development review process, or planning process, as we call it, is how cities meet their housing obligation. Housing legislation came to the forefront in 2017 with a package of 15 bills designed to increase the production of housing through providing funding for affordable housing, streamlining the review and approval process for housing, increasing accountability and reporting requirements for local governments, and preserving our existing affordable housing stock. As I mentioned, there were a number of bills that came through in 2017. Going into effect in January 2020 was SB 330, which is our latest housing production bill. And while housing projects still require public hearings and city approval, SB 330 is really designed to streamline the public review process, which I'll get into in a few minutes. Next slide, Cindy. So San Ramon, for how we work in our development review process, we encourage all new projects, including housing, to utilize what's called a concept review process. This process really allows the property owner and applicant to solicit feedback from the city staff, the public, and the planning commission regarding a potential project. This process does end once the commission meeting is complete, and we provide comments back to the applicant for their consideration. Following the completion, the owner may decide to proceed with the project as originally proposed. They may modify the project based on the comments received from the commission or even from the public, and pursue an additional review for more feedback on a revised concept, which came out of that original concept review. I want to note that not all projects will proceed with the formal application. They may decide that they don't see it beneficial for them to go forward, or the city has identified significant issues for the project not to move forward. So it really becomes a business decision for that applicant to decide they really want to move forward into the next steps. And so the next steps really consist of the entitlement process. This is the formal review process. And at that point in time, we get down really into the project's compliance with our zoning ordinance, our general plan, and our design review. We'll conduct an environmental review, basically to determine what the project's impacts may be on the environment from an air quality standpoint, greenhouse gas emissions, traffic, water quality, and the like. Through that process, we do have public engagement, which are public hearings and even public workshops, where we will invite the public in and solicit their comments for and against the project. Following the completion of our public hearings and providing staff reports to the commission will take an action on the project, and that decision really is based on findings which include conditions of approval. So basically the justification, how the project does or does not comply with the city codes and the general plan. Next slide, Cindy. So as mentioned by Councilmember Zafar, the City Council's goals is really to focus housing in the core of the city, placed next to jobs and retail shopping and in proximity to our walking district that we are now developing, preserve our open space and our existing neighborhoods. We have a number of strategies to manage growth in the city. The predominant one is our urban growth boundary, which limits growth to infill areas contiguous to the developed areas of the city. Second, our performance standards within our general plan, such as our level of service to ensure our intersections are operating at acceptable levels. And finally, our overall general plan, which creates our long-term vision for controlled and managed growth. So there are a number of key factors when we look at where we place housing to ensure it doesn't impact our open space or creep into our open space. And that's really where our urban growth boundary comes into play, because basically the urban growth boundary is the edge of urban development, and utility and urban services cannot be provided outside an adopted urban growth boundary. Next slide, Cindy. So with a bit of overview on housing in San Ramon, I want to talk a bit about the influences from Sacramento on housing production. And as I mentioned, Steve will continue the conversation and discuss our regional needs housing allocation process. So as we're all aware, the state of California has fallen behind in housing production. And the goal is focused on increasing housing production to house all levels of affordability. Cities can plan and improve housing, but has limited control over the construction of housing. Essentially, we have to identify those opportunity sites, but we do not construct housing. It's really market driven. And housing that is constructed may take many years to come to fruition. Doherty Valley, for example, was approved in Contra Costa County in 1992. We are now seeing in 2021 the final units being constructed. As with our recent approval of our City Walk project, it's 4,500 units, but that project will take 25 years for construction to complete. So housing, while it's approved in a certain year, it may take many, many years, depending on the scale of the project, to be completely built out and those units provided for our residents to purchase. Thank you, Cindy. So the next I really want to kind of touch on is SB 330. This is the latest housing production bill that is in effect, and it's in effect for 5 years and expires in 2025. And it is meant to expedite the approval process. It does apply to all cities in California and applies to all development that is consistent with the general plan, the zoning ordinance, and our subdivision standards, which means there is no personal or subjective judgment. We have to view these projects and review and consider these projects based on objective standards. So essentially, an example would be a really simple one is the color of the house that the developer wants to paint. They want to paint it a beige, but the city wants it to be a blue. Well, that is very subjective. Unless you have development or objective standards that say all houses in this subdivision or in the city are going to be an earth tone palette, that's something that we cannot really weigh in on the decision. We are very proactive as a city in working with the development community before they file an application, really discuss those nuances and those things that we know may be subjective through the process in order to come to some agreement that we feel will benefit our residents and help the project to move forward. Housing development under SB 330 is defined as an all residential project or a mixed use project where 2/3 of the square footage that's being constructed is for residential purposes, and also transitional and supportive housing. Next slide, Cindy. Are you, oh, I'm sorry, there we go. I am behind, there we go. So under SB 330, there are a maximum of 5 public hearings that are allowed for development of a project. And a public hearing is broadly defined as any workshop, public hearing, workshop, or similar meetings. So in San Ramon, we have a number of city committees that we like to have our housing projects go through: Architecture Review Board, Economic Development, if there's a mixed use project, our Housing Advisory Committee, our Open Space Committee potentially. But with SB 330, any of those meetings would be construed as a public hearing. So our intent is essentially to provide the Planning Commission with the ability to hold the most public hearings, which is up to 4. And we have to reserve 1 hearing for the city council in case there's an appeal on a housing project. So it has really limited the ability to have the input from our city committees in the housing project process. And one part of this SB 330 is the deployment application completeness. It allows a deployment application review process to lock in the rules, the regulations, and standards that are effective at the time that review process is filed for. And that's for 180 days. And so essentially during that 180-day waiting period, the developer can decide if they want to proceed with a formal application. SB 330 also reduces the time to approve or disapprove a project to 60, 90, or 180 days, depending on the type of environmental review that we will be conducting. Next slide, Cindy. So if a housing development project complies with the city standards is denied, the burden of proof is really on the city to demonstrate that the project would have a significant adverse impact on public health or safety. Essentially, SB 330 has made it very difficult for cities to deny a housing project to ensure that that housing is to move housing production forward. So essentially what is really well for the community is not a criteria for denial. So if we don't like the look of the housing project, we can't deny it just solely based on aesthetics. There has to be a public health and safety impact that we have documented and that the burden of proof is demonstrated by the city. And another means of denial is that there's no feasible mitigation to mitigate or avoid that identified adverse effect. And SB 330 does carry some teeth in that fines up to $10,000 to $50,000 per unit paid by the city if the court determines an inappropriate denial of a project, and the court may approve the project anyway. So if the city does act in a very subjective matter without burden of proof, that project is litigated and the city is found to inappropriate denied the project, there could be fines levied on the city and the project approved anyway. So there'd be a financial impact to the city and the project would still move forward. Next slide, Cindy. So at this point, I'm going to turn over to Cindy Yee, and she's going to talk about the regional housing needs allocation process. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Debbie. So as Debbie mentioned, state law requires all cities to plan for the housing needs of everyone in the community. That planning effort begins with the regional housing needs allocation, which we locally refer to as RHNA. RHNA kicks off an 8-year planning cycle in which cities must plan for the projected housing needs of San Ramon. The next housing cycle begins in 2023 and ends in 2031. So there are various levels of government that play a specific role in planning for housing. At the state level, the state identifies how many housing units the Bay Area must plan for over the next 8-year cycle. The Bay Area Regional Planning Agency for the Bay Area is called the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG. ABAG creates a methodology for how the units will be divided amongst the various cities and counties within the Bay Area. And San Ramon's role would then be to plan for and program the share of our arena that gets assigned to San Ramon. And we do that with the housing element update. The housing element is one of the chapters within the general plan that's required to be updated every 8 years in order for us to continue to remain accountable to state housing law. So once the city receives our regional housing needs allocation, our housing element programs for various income levels. These income levels are divided into 5 income ranges that range from extremely low income to above moderate. And that's based on the area median income for Contra Costa County. When one refers to affordable housing, San Ramon defines affordable as those making an annual income of less than $100,000 per a one-person household. So in San Ramon, as you can see, professions that identify as a lower income household include a first-year teacher with a master's degree, a paramedic, or a restaurant cook. Anybody that falls above area median income would be considered moderate or above moderate. So oftentimes we get asked why the city plans for, why do we have to plan for more housing? And I think it's really important to look at it from a regional context. The Bay Area is lucky enough to be a region that's rich in jobs, and with any new jobs and new businesses, they're attracted to our area for various reasons. Over the next 35 years, the region is expected to add 1.4 million jobs through 2050. And in order to fill these jobs, there's an expected population growth that is needed of nearly 2.7 million people to be able to continue to support these jobs that are created. And as a result, because of the population increase, the cities and Bay Area have to plan for at least 1.5 million housing units over that 35-year cycle in order to be able to accommodate for that projected growth. And so as we talk about job growth, you know, what we really have to look at is the job growth really is surpassing the amount of housing that we're actually constructing in the Bay Area. So you can see here in Contra Costa County, we're adding 5 new jobs for every 1 housing unit that is constructed. And every community within the Bay Area is seeing the same issue of adding more jobs, which is great, but not being able to catch up with the production of housing needs to support that job growth. From ABAG, San Ramon plays an important role in providing housing unit production. And in the Bay Area, ABAG projects that year over year, we're going to need to produce nearly 50,000 units in order to catch up to the job growth projection. As you can see, the Bay Area is producing housing units, but not at the level of projected units that we need to see. And so every year that we are not producing the housing numbers that the region needs, it only increases the pressure to build more housing through various means, one of which we've been talking about is legislation from the state. And there are many factors that contribute to the drop in housing production. We're still recovering from the effects of the Great Recession. As we all know, costs continue to rise, especially in construction, for materials, for labor, for land costs. And there's just a limited supply of land. We want to balance the needs of the community with parks and open space and retail and commercial development, but all of that, needs to balance, and when you push in one direction, oftentimes you're then pulled in another one, and it's really a delicate balance to try to address this housing production concern. So, in order to address this drop in production, what our region is seeing is an exponential increase in a need to plan for additional housing production in the Bay Area. So you can see here in our last housing cycle, the cycle that we're currently in right now, our 8-year period through 2023, the Bay Area is planning for about 188,000 units. In 2023 through 2031, that number is now going to increase to 441,000 units that the Bay Area has to plan for. Locally in San Ramon, we're seeing that same effect. And so our current cycle right now, San Ramon has to plan for about 1,400 units. And we're going to be then shifting in this next year cycle to a expected allocation of over 5,000 units that we'll have to plan for over the next 8 years. And I should say, not only are we planning for those 5,000 units, but we have to plan for those 5,000 units at various income levels. In our next RHNA cycle, over 61% of the units that have been allocated to San Ramon have to be able to be affordable to those in the low, very low, and moderate income category. In this slide, you can just see the draft regional housing needs allocation for San Ramon and how we compare to other surrounding jurisdictions. Contra Costa County has been given, unincorporated Contra Costa County has been given an allocation of over 7,000 units. San Ramon at that 5,000 level, Walnut Creek, nearly 6,000. Danville has an allocation of 2,000 units. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see that what that means in terms of the growth rate for those communities. San Ramon, based on the additional housing units that we produce, will have an increased growth rate of 18% over that 8-year cycle. And so because of the multi-year community engagement process, San Ramon is now in the process of preparing our housing element update. We're doing this in addition to a comprehensive general plan update so that we can make sure that we're tying housing with land use, with our growth management elements, with our safety and infrastructure obligations. So right now, the draft allocations have been provided to us by ABAG. The methodology is being finalized, and it begins an appeal process for the allocations that the city receives. By late 2021, later this year, the cities will receive our final RHNA allocations, which will then continue our process of multi-year engagement with the public through outreach and engagement, numerous other webinars such as this one, and receiving feedback through the public hearing process and workshops on what our community's goals and priorities are in terms of housing. Once all of that analysis is completed, including environmental review, the cities will have to adopt our housing element and submit those to the state Department of Housing and Community Development by late 2022. For our next 8-year cycle, San Ramon is really focused on a number of key factors. We're looking at our developable land area and really focusing development within the core of San Ramon, primarily infill opportunities and locations of properties that are closer to jobs, to services that currently exist and are planned for San Ramon. We also have an opportunity to look at additional housing opportunity sites. This map here shows our current housing opportunity sites in San Ramon. A number of these sites will have been developed after this current cycle that we're in. And so we will have to begin looking at new opportunities to be able to plan for those 5,000 units that San Ramon has been assigned. So in terms of our long-term goals, there are a number of tools that the city has to be able to address housing production and housing for all segments of the population. The city locally has an inclusionary housing ordinance and a commercial linkage fee ordinance that requires that with every new development that gets built, there's going to be a percentage of those units that are going to be set aside for those affordable income households. We also have a commercial linkage fee that also is tied to commercial development and the impact of new development on affordable housing. We also leverage state mandates that require cities to allow for density bonuses with projects, development of accessory dwelling units to increase housing production and to provide a variety of housing. And using tools like SB 330 and SB 35 that streamlines the review and approval process. There are a number of bills that are currently under consideration and will see some additional movement over the next year. There are a number of bills that are highlighted here that are addressing housing density and housing development and looking at opportunities and ways to continue this goal of increasing housing production. And really the bottom line is that, you know, in order to continue to maintain the jobs and maintain the population that's expected in the Bay Area, we really need to be focused on increasing housing production. And we're seeing a lot of the bills that are over the last few years and looking ahead, that they're really trying to address this increase of housing production, increasing housing sites that we may not typically consider as, you know, ideal housing sites, eliminating local restrictions such as the maximum number of public hearings that a city might be able to have, and also providing tools such as CEQA streamlining to reduce the amount of analysis that applicants and developers may have to go through if a city has already done some of that analysis. So there are a number of tools that are going to increase this housing production. San Ramon has done quite a bit over the last few years in trying to meet our regional housing needs allocation. I'm going to put in a shameless plug right now for one of our projects that is a for sale project in San Ramon. We're currently providing 28 affordable units that are for sales to the low and very low income households in San Ramon, and have an opportunity. If you're interested, please visit the city's webpage. You can get more information. Debbie and my contact information is available here as well, so that you can reach out. And if you have questions about any of the local programs that are in the city or are in need of how to find housing, we are more than happy to help you with those questions. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Stephen.
Great, thank you. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I know that we have a hard stop at 10 o'clock, so I'll turn it over to Simone for a couple of very brief questions, and then I'll leave it to Councilmember Zafar for the closing remarks.
So our first question is for Senator Glazer and for Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan. And I'll let you decide which order you answer in. What are some of the factors you need to consider when working with legislators across the state?
Well, I would say first to be sensitive to their own communities. I mean, we all try to do a good job of representing our constituents in San Ramon and in Contra Costa and Alameda counties. And so their job, they have the same responsibility. And so understanding their constituencies and the needs is very important in trying to build alliances, which is a valuable part of our jobs.
Yeah, and the only thing I think I would add to that is, we're an incredibly diverse state, right? 40 million people, counties that look very different, rural counties, urban counties, suburban counties. And part of it is also finding common ground, right? I mean, I think although our colleagues in San Francisco often have different viewpoints than we do because we represent different constituencies, when you talk about, wildfires, they understand the fear that we have about that and how that impacts what motivates us. And so trying to find that common ground, even where there are differences in viewpoints, I think is really critical in getting to a place that we can move good legislation forward that meets the needs of all of our constituents.
Thank you both. Steve, do we have time? How many questions do we have time for?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be our only question because we do have that hard stop at 10. So I'll turn it over to Councilmember Zafar.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you so much, Cindy and Debbie, for doing this presentation. As we know, this is a very hot topic in San Ramon, housing, and how we're planning housing in San Ramon, and how all the different projects are coming together. So very, very informational. I really appreciate this update. I really want to thank Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Kahan and Senator Glazer for really, taking the time to join us this morning, despite a very busy schedule that you guys have with the legislature this week. Appreciate that. Just ask that you continue to advocate for the city, especially Senator Glazer has sat in our seats before as a council member, so you know how close we are with the community and how much our communities are engaged and passionate about housing here in San Ramon. And Stephen and Simone, thank you so much for continuing to run these updates. They are very informational. I continue to get great feedback and how much our residents appreciate you putting these updates. So I was honored to host it today. We will continue to have different council members now rotate through and host these. So hopefully you will continue to join us in future updates as well. With that, we're right at 10 o'clock. So